Hello, everyone to Forest Focus as we discuss the latest Nottingham Forest transfer and injury news and ask if the Reds need to nail down some key contract or face problems in the future. So joining to discuss Anthony Elanga, Morgan Gibbs-White, Neco Williams and more is Michael Temple. Temps, morning, how are you?
Good, mate. Joining us to discuss whether all our best players will leave or not is me and Gaz.
Don't say that. We will do some incoming transfer news potentially. That's gone a little bit quiet for a few days. Also joining us today is Reds legend Garry Birtles. Morning, Gary, you well?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yourself?
Good. Not too bad at all. Not too bad. We shall get into it because Temps is only with us for the first 30 minutes or so, and there's quite a lot to cover, as mentioned. We'll start with Anthony Elanga. Lots of talk in various outlets that Newcastle would like to sign him. The Daily Mail probably pushing it the most, saying there's an inquiry in. But it will be a very expensive deal to do because Forest are in a strong position. 23 years old, 3 years left on his contract and coming off the back with a very good season. So we'll get into talk of fees and see what these chaps think about it. Just in general, Gary, what's your thoughts on him potentially leaving and the hole it would leave in our team if he were to go? How important is he?
Wouldn't want to see him go. I would do everything they can possibly to keep him at the City ground, because I think you've got to look as a player. Yeah, you want the best wages, you want to play at the best, highest level, the best competitions. But you look at Jack Grealish, at Manchester City, how things, change for him, and it looks like he's going to be leaving Manchester City. What would you rather do? Would you rather play, given 100% chance of starting most of games, which he would do at the City ground, or go somewhere where he might not be starting every week? It's a difficult one. Agents will have their say, of course they will. But I really hope he stays, because what Forest have got at the moment is a manager that trusts the players he puts on that pitch. And that's what Brian Clough used to do. He had every trust in you, every belief that you were going to do the right things. And you can see that camaraderie within that squad is unbelievably good. And, do you go somewhere else and, it could all change again. He's come alive since he joined from Manchester United. And, it'd be great to see him stay without a doubt, because he can progress again.
Let's branch off for a little bit of breaking news. The Forest have just announced Harry Toffolo will leave, which was kind of expected, and their full retain list is going to be announced later today, this afternoon, which interestingly suggests Willy Bolly is going to stay, because if he was leaving, I think he'd be on that list. So I imagine he'll stay. Just quickly, any thoughts on that? Temps, Toffolo, potentially Bolly, they're the main two, I think, who were out of contract, weren't they?
I think just credit to Harry Toffolo for being a good squad player. He was always ready to play when he was called upon, always made himself available, seems to be a really positive figure around the group. And the truth is that the level has passed him by to get into the starting 11 at Forest, and he's aware of that, but he didn't dissent. And when he was called upon, he was a regular kind of 7 out of 10 contributor, wasn't he? So I think I wouldn't go as far as saying he's been an unsung hero, but I think he's been a quality member of the squad that's never let us down. And he's one of those that leaves with our best wishes. And I think he'll get a good reception whenever he comes back to the City ground.
Thanks to Paul Morley and Tom Penniston in the way. By the way, in the live chat for flagging that, because I would have missed it while we were talking. On Elanga then, Temps, to me, it feels like he's a really tough sell, because he's the only player that's that kind of direct runner, absolutely rapid, will run in behind. We're talking of signing Igor Jesus, who's supposed to be linking the play to feed through balls. So if you're going to sell him, to me, it's got to be for a very big fee, because you're going to need a sort of like-for-like replacement. And Elanga's value is such they're probably quite hard to find. So a tough sell for you?
Really tough sell for me. I just think that absolute pace as a weapon should not be underestimated in our side. I think the manner in which we play requires certain personnel, and he's one of them. He gives us the ability to play a 2 when we need to. If he joins Chris Wood, he gives us the chance to play asymmetric formations, can pop up on the left or the right-hand side. And when we're at our very, very best, trying to expose weaker opposition with that 4-2-3-1, I think he's a really, really essential cog. I think he's at his absolute best when Callum Hudson-Odoi operates on the other side and we play with 2 classic wingers. I understand why the interest is there. His production in terms of goals and assists is good, and he's only going to get better. There's a really good piece in The Athletic today, which puts Anthony Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi and Morgan Gibbs-White in the top 20 players in the big 4 European leagues for receiving the ball between the lines and playing dangerous passes. And it puts them in the company of the likes of Cole Palmer, Florian Wirtz, Yamin Lamal, the very, very best in trying to identify what it is these guys do and why they've been able to have such an impact on their teams. So if I was elsewhere, Anthony Elanga would be on my shortlist to try and extract from Forest. But how I see this one playing out is if Morgan Gibbs-White is sold for significant money, it allows us to build a bit of a moat around that tier of players like Anthony Elanga that we're really keen to keep. So I hope we can resist the suitors. And I hope if we do sell Morgan, it is to protect the likes of the centre halves and Anthony Elanga and keep the core of this Forest squad together for an extended period of time. Not surprised by the interest. Really hope that we can keep him.
Temps reference there has got his goals and assist output. 38 games, obviously, in the Premier League last season. He started 80% of them. 6 goals, 11 assists, which is pretty decent, Gary. I suppose next season you'd be aiming for 10 and 10 for at least for those, would you? Did you see an evolution of him as a player last season?
Absolutely. I mean, those assists, and he was leading, Morgan Gibbs-White as well, who's been, our most, creative player. So to get close to what he's been doing, and he's in the England squad, the full England squad, it speaks volumes for how he's taken on board, coming to Forest, and how he's repaying the faith that's been put in him by the manager, by everybody. He feels part of something that's very good at the moment. And it's going to be a difficult one because, teams are coming in who are in the Champions League, and that is the highest you can play in club football, and who wouldn't want to play in the Champions League? But we are in Europe. It might change. We might get a little foot up to the next level. This Crystal Palace things going on and on. So it's a very difficult one for him, and it's going to be difficult for any of those players at our club when other teams come in for them because of what's happening and the progress Forest have made last season to want to leave there. It's going to be a real, dilemma, I think, when it comes to making that final decision.
Let's talk about fees then. I think David in the chat makes a fair point, and Mark said this in our WhatsApp group about the fee. You've got to bear in mind a replacement and how much you'd have to pay. Another comment here about Brighton are looking to pay 40 million euros for Kostoulas, that is, who's a good player. Where would you put him at then, Elanga, to make you even start talking temps?
You've got to put 50 million down to even get to the table with Anthony Elanga, and I think any transfer fee would be north of 60. I think 65 starts to test your resolve because the player has some influence at that point, and knows that a transfer of that level is going to command a significant increase in wages. But I don't think you even get a reply to the text if it's south of 50. And I think anyone coming in must be prepared to pay 60, 65 plus to get him across the line. The option for Forest, I suppose, the interesting debate would be if selling Anthony Elanga could facilitate the contract or keep Morgan Gibbs-White at the club, and let's say that requires 220, 240 grand a week. Would we do it at that point? Is the finance required to protect another prized asset? Both of those boys are extremely valuable. I think Morgan Gibbs-White's the most likely transfer, and I'd be very disappointed if we settled for anything less than 65 million for Anthony Elanga.
A few people, Jared, Pat, and Wake Up News, all saying that there's a sell-on clause to Man U, which I've forgotten about, and I'm sure there
75.
Is. What about you, Gary? Temp says 60, 65. I've seen other numbers in the chat. What would you say?
Well, when you see some of the transfer fees for other players going to other clubs who I don't think are as good as Anthony Elanga, then you've got to go for the highest thing you can. You've got to put in a cheeky bid, like if you're buying a house. You try it on, don't you? You try and get the lowest, but you've got to go and try and get the highest. I don't think it's cut and dry that they're going to leave. All this interest, but Mr. Marinakis, is the investment he's put in this club is incredible, and he wants to progress yet again. And I think he'll be prepared, from what he saw last season, of certain players that he will give them, maybe what they want. Not everybody, but the key players. And I think if that happens, I think one player must be sold to bring in other players, as long as we don't lose the centre halves, and the goalkeeper. Because, nobody talks about, losing maybe Matt Sells, because, he was unbelievable. Probably the best goalkeeper in the Premier League last season. So you're going to have to sacrifice somebody. It'd be interesting to see who it is. You know, you've got the financial fair play and all that, so they've got to take all that into consideration again. So yeah, it'd be an interesting summer. I keep picking papers up over the weekend, and I'm looking for Nottingham Forest are interested in, but I've not seen one Nottingham Forest are interested in any of the papers this weekend. Everybody else is going for players, and you know it'd be nice to see Forest. I'm sure it's in the pipeline, but yeah, it'd be nice to see something concrete.
Matt, I was just going to add, I think part of the model of our club at this moment of time, as we look to grow and compete with the teams we competed with last year, is to acquire players, add value to them, and sell them for profit. So we can't dismiss out of hand the need to refuse any team that wants to come to the table to buy one of our players, because the sustainability of this success will require us to unearth more hidden gems, more Murillos, more Anthony Elangas, more Callum Hudson-Odois, players that we sign at a fee, which is then laughed at 12 months later when we see what they can do on the pitch. We can't generate the ticket income, the commercial income that some of the bigger clubs have. We're going to have a bigger slice of the broadcast pie now than ever before, which will really help us and be a positive step in the right direction. And Forest are growing commercially and looking to add to their capacity. But in the interim, in these next 2, 3, 4 years, it is going to be hard to resist every bid that comes our way.
On that then, Temps, I was going to say what Fletch said this time last week, that for him, we shouldn't sell anyone unless we have to with PSR. And I've done lots of reading on this and listened to lots of people. And there's a consensus that we probably don't have to this summer, but it would pressure us next summer. Or we have to be, you know, clever and reach out to John Textor a few times with some fringe players, and we can make it work. But you don't think what Fletch says about just keep everyone and go for it is maybe okay, but it's not sustainable? What's your view on that?
I think it's unrealistic. I think in an ideal world, this Forest team would perform as they have this year. It'd be another year older and wiser and crack on and develop. But the circumstances, the balance of the squad, players are leaving, new ones are going to come in to replace the fringe players. Some of those are going to break in and displace the harmony of the current 11. Other players are going to have their heads turned by money or an ambition, as Garry said, to play Champions League football. So simply saying there's a policy of no one out in this window, whilst idealistic, I think it's just impossible. If Morgan Gibbs-White, if we turn down £75 million offer from Man City for Morgan Gibbs-White and don't reward him with a new contract, circa 200, 250k a week, you've got an unhappy player there, and that can have a bit of a knock-on effect. On the flip side, you break your wage structure for one, quite a few more come knocking. So all these balances and nuances that go to assembling, preserving and trading in the Premier League environment make it extremely unlikely that Forest will be able to keep hold of all of their crown jewels. I've said this before, of course. I think 12 months ago, I was resigned to the fact that Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White would leave. But I think there's only so many times that a Niakate, a Mangala, a Danilo can command a transfer fee in and around 25 million to keep the wolf from the door. Plus, our trading record's good. The reason we employ these recruitment teams, these scouting teams, is so that when Brennan Johnson is sold for a pile of cash over there, you can go and sign Callum Hudson-Odoi, Anthony Elanga, and bang the change in your pocket. So we've got to have some faith in that machinery and just accept that modern football is what it is. Players are going to move on. New players are going to sign.
I think the perfect scenario here would be the agents talking to their players and saying, right, okay, Forest had a great season. You know, they're in Europe anyway. Transfer window in January. Why not just sit on this? You know, let's see how the season starts for Forest. If it's another, you know, great season starting wise, and they're in contention again, or they're not in contention in January, then they've got the option to go then. You know, that's what I'd hope, rather than, you know, getting rid of everybody now. I tend to agree with Fletch, you know, a little bit in that respect, because we don't want to see any of them go. We want to add to what we've got, as every team in the Premier League do with their best players. You know, they don't want to let any of their best players go, but what they do want to do, they want to add, you know, more quality to the team so you can progress more. And I think that's the way to go. You know, that transfer window is a real good opportunity for players to stay at Forest and see how we do. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, it'll be a one-season wonder for Forest. Let's see how it goes. And who knows? It might be. I don't know. But I think that's a good plan of action, just to see how things go. And if it doesn't go, they've got every reason to say, right, I want to go and play at a higher level now, and for a team that is going to be consistently in contention for Champions League. But why can't we do that? Why are we going to be a one-season wonder? I certainly hope not.
Yeah, and I think as well, like a big sale every now and then lets you reinvest much more than a few smaller sales. Like, because the smaller sales turn a smaller PSR profit. I hate getting into the PSR weeds, but it's harder to invest with smaller sales than it is with a big sale, where you can really turn one big sale into 3 big signings, and that's probably how we build longer term, I think. And I'll pick up on that around new contracts shortly. But just before that, a word for the Trent Nav, a reminder: England v Senegal at the City Ground tomorrow. We'll come on to England as well. 7:45 p.m. kickoff. Fothers has got his interactive quiz and all the build-up. And if you don't have a ticket, then you can enjoy the game at the Nav, because it'll be on the big screen. Enjoy might be a loose term after watching the other game, but have a few beers anyway. It'll be worth it. Talking then of new contracts, and this is something that I think is a really big issue when you look at, we've got Ola Aina, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and Neco Williams entering the final year of their contract. Morgan Gibbs-White's got 2 years left, and if he doesn't sign a new contract, then it presents a problem in the summer. Is this really, even more than signings, potentially, Temps, our top priority to, as you say, reward some of these top players and not let them go on a cheap, or dare I say even worse, free transfer?
It is for me. I'd celebrate either of Ola Aina, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Neco Williams signing a new contract more than a new signing at this stage. I think they've been a model of consistency. The fullbacks in particular have been resistant to injury until Neco unfortunately went down in that Wales game. But they're exactly the bracket of players that we can be successful with. I think they can operate in and around the top 5 in the Premier League, as we've seen. I think they'll be able to hold their own in European competition. There is a fitness question mark, I think it's fair to say, around Callum Hudson-Odoi. We've got more games and minutes out of him this season than anyone else has managed to, but he has to manage his minutes given some of the challenges he's had earlier in his career. But yes, whilst the headaches are out there for the recruitment team to potentially replace Morgan Gibbs-White, go and find this second striker, find the depth that's going to fill those players that are departing. I would like to think that Ola Aina, Neco Williams and Callum Hudson-Odoi can help this Forest side for 3, 4, 5 seasons and more if they so choose. And I think they've seen already that they've got an ownership group that are committed to success. A management team are set up, a group of players that can get them to where they need to be. And if we can find the level of finance that they demand, because they'll be more expensive now than they were when they signed their first contracts, we should absolutely commit them for periods 3, 4, 5 years in a heartbeat. I think they've all been excellent. It'd be deserving and it'd be celebrated by the player and the fans alike.
As Lee says, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't already. That would be great. Often a quick tangent. Danny references Omar Richards. We'll have a podcast on Omar Richards later in the week to see if there's anything left there for what he can do for us. On Neco as well, Forest said that he's come back. He's got an ankle injury. He was stretched off against Wales, but for Wales, Neco tweeted say that get ready for pre-season and things like that. So hopefully it's not too bad. Just on the new contracts, Gary, I mean, I don't think we're a football club that can afford to let players go for free. So a big priority for you?
Just trying to keep the players we've got, the squad we've got. And if one has to go, then one has to go. And going back to Elanga, he's pulled out the Sweden squad, hasn't he, as well?
I've not seen that, has he?
Yeah, apparently he's pulled out the squad. And, that's making people think that he's concentrating on talking with Newcastle. That's what the gossip is, apparently. I hope it's totally and utterly wrong. But we'll have to see how that develops. No, it's the recruitment anywhere is paramount. Anybody will tell you that. Everybody's trying to get, the right players in the right positions. Everybody thinks, they see something in somebody else that somebody else doesn't see. And that's how important recruitment is. It's not just going for the obvious. there are players out there who you can nurture. I mean, look at the ones who came to Forest. Everybody thought Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, probably their careers were going a little bit south. But, with the right manager, they certainly prospered without a doubt. Morgan Gibbs-White has come on leaps and bounds. He's in the England squad. The recruitment of Milenkovic was just incredible. So there are players out there. Nobody went for, it's 12 million quid for goodness sake. And look how, fabulous it was last season with that partnership. Murillo's still a young lad. That partnership can grow. It can progress. And like Temp said, the fullbacks have just been, absolutely superb. So I think the base of the team at the moment is very good. And, just try and talk players into just saying, well, okay, if we're not doing so well, like I said, the transfer window, if you want to go, we'll let you go, or something like that. I don't know how it works anymore, but keep the best players you've got. If it's financial fair play and you've got to let one go, then you have to do that. But just try and keep your best players out and just add if you possibly can.
Just on Elanga, there's a quote from John Dale Thomason, who's the manager, saying that it was arranged a long time ago that he wasn't going to play this game for personal reasons. So hopefully that's all fine on that front. Do you think there's anything in the Elanga Isak thing, Temps, international teammates, chance to link up at Newcastle with, to me, the best striker, all-round striker in the Premier League? Would that be an appeal, do you think?
Yeah, there'll be a conversation, won't they? But I think more than anything that they've just watched him play and the manner in which he's thrived in the Premier League, as Garry said, since leaving Manchester United and coming to a team where he can be a bit of a focal point. But I've watched his highlights for Man United, and you could see what he was capable of. He was a little bit raw, but that goes with inexperience. From taking to a team that's going to let him start 30 games, and you've seen what's happening. I was really impressed with Anthony Elanga in general, the way he trains, the way he prepares. There was a great Instagram clip of him with his speed coach in the week, and he just trains like an Olympian. He's just absolutely on it, wired in. His technique's unbelievable. He's such an explosive runner. We've seen that in the past, and the ability to twin that with the footballing skill and the deftness of touch, and the quality of his crosses has improved so much. He's taking decent corners. I just think there's so much more to come from Anthony Elanga. If Alexander Isak thinks he can influence that, maybe he'll give him a positive review on Newcastle. But there's no way a player's going to move between Premier League clubs out of friendship. He's got enough mates in the Forest side, and I dare say he'd have enough mates wherever he goes for that not to be too much of a factor.
I think the one key thing in all this is people in the dressing room. Hopefully can have a say and, be a factor in keeping players at the football club. Chris Wood, look how he's thrived since he got in the team. It was Taiwo was the striker, the main striker. Chris was in the background. All of a sudden he's been given trust and faith by Nuno, and he's thrived on it. So you just hope, like people like Milenkovic, who seems a really, stern, honest character. He demands a lot out. You can see I always watch him when I'm watching a game, and he's always talking, he's always gesticulating, and you just hope that those sort of players can have an influence on the players that might be leaving the club. And it sometimes works, when your teammates are saying, look, don't go there because of this and that, look what we've started here, it could be the start of something big. You just hope that you've got those characters in the dressing room to be able to maybe make them think a little bit.
Just lastly on Elanga, and Temps has got to go in 2 minutes, so I'll throw one more thing to him. The reports are Newcastle don't have a bottomless pit. They don't have money to go out and spend 200 million, 150 million. Jared Pedro seems like their top target. So unless they do something like sell Lewis Miley, an academy player, then maybe it's hard to finance an Elanga deal. Maybe we get Lewis Miley. I don't know, but it does sound a complicated one. I think the big thing is we hold a lot of cards with 3 years left on his deal, and it'll be a very expensive one for them. Temps, just before we go, I wanted to ask you, and I'll throw it to Garry as well, obviously. Morgan Gibbs-White, England. I don't know if you saw it. He might start tomorrow. He should start tomorrow. He got like 3 pretty pointless minutes and almost set up a goal for Andorra. I don't know. General thoughts on Tuchel, Gibbs-White? Feels like a bit of a wrong appointment already to me, but what do you think?
Look, Morgan Gibbs-White in the flashes he's had for England looks really comfortable and almost enhanced by the runs of the players around him. I think he's made impact in every appearance that he's made, and he'll be a focal point if he does start at the City Ground tomorrow, as seems likely. Thomas Tuchel, not convinced just yet, but let's be honest, he's going to make or break his reputation in major tournaments. So if he goes to North America next year and does well, he'll be a national hero throughout the group stages. He'll be on the front of the sun with a turnip on his head. So I haven't made my mind up yet about Thomas Tuchel in the context of international football, but I have about Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he can be a 30, 40 cap England player. I think he's one of the best English qualified players in that 10 bracket. He faces significant competition if he's going to be a starter at the World Cup next year. Any season will determine whether or not that's going to be the case. But it'd be great to show him some love at the City Ground tomorrow. I've got my ticket, and I hope it's not as boring as the last game.
Lovely. We'll let you go. You've got to go. Me and Gary will mop everything up. But thank you very much, Temps.
Nice
to
see you.
See you soon.
See you in a bit. See you in a bit. Work gets in the way, but there you go. Good to have Temps with us for half an hour. What do you think about Morgan? 91 minute, 91st minute sub, I think it was, against Andorra.
I sat here with a mate, and I said it's embarrassing just bringing him on in the 91st minute. What are you supposed to do? I mean, he sat there, and so is Declan Rice, and I've got nothing against Henderson at all. But he's 34. He went to Saudi. His club in Holland are talking about getting rid of him as well now. That is not the way forward. He might be great in the dressing room. You know, the kit man might be great in the dressing room, but he ain't going to put on an England shirt and score you a hat trick or create anything for you. It seemed nonsense to do that. And it was one of the worst England performances I can remember seeing. You could see that the crowd were, is empty. Apart from the England fans who went, and it just made no sense. And Tuchel saying, well, you didn't like the attitude. I wouldn't have liked the attitude, of players. You need something else. A couple of players, stood out a little bit, but generally it was just dross. It really was. And people are saying, the pundits were saying, well, they did the job. They've won 3. They're at the top of the league. Yeah, fine, but you can't always switch on performances like a light switch. You have to be consistent, and Serbia will be the test. Of course it will. They're the 2 best teams in the group. But it wasn't an acceptable performance, and Harry Kane's come out and said it wasn't brilliant. It's got to improve without a doubt. When you look at Portugal and Spain last night, that's what you're up against. That's where you have to reach, and that performance did nothing to convince anybody that England are capable of doing that at the moment.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens tomorrow. I really hope he starts. I feel like he should do, otherwise it's a bit pointless him being in the squad. Back to Forest stuff. It feels like we're talking about a lot of negative stuff, but we haven't completely talked about Nico Dominguez. We touched on it the other day. Reports in Argentina, Gary saying he's out for 4 months after knee surgery. A piece by Paul Taylor in The Athletic saying that Forest hope to have him back either for the start of pre-season or during pre-season. So we'll see how that plays out. A big blow for the player and a big blow for Forest, isn't it? It felt like he's another player who really came on last year for you, do you think?
He came on, but I think it was never standout, like sometimes Anderson, Gibbs-White, Elanga. You never thought, oh my word, he was man of the match or anything like that. Maybe it's got a lot to do. Maybe he wasn't starting games. Every player needs to start games to prove that he can do it on a consistent basis. So you have to take that into consideration. But it's weird when Argentina are saying he's out for 4 months, and Forrest is, he's saying he's going to be back for pre-season. So yeah, neither of those comments are anywhere near each other, and just hope he has a good summer. He gets well quickly, and he's back in the squad, because he can make a difference, because he is a decent player. We've seen in snatches that he can do things, but sometimes I think he switches off. You watch him, and he sometimes, for me, in areas where we can get hurt against the better teams, sometimes at that level you can't switch off. but
thought
he can be an integral part of the squad without a doubt.
Yeah, I thought he was. I thought he finished the season really well. I think he had a good season. Do you think? What's his best position, do you think? Because sometimes in a 2, I don't think that's his best position if it was him and Anderson. But when he played sort of tucked in from the right wing, it maybe suited him but didn't suit us as much. I don't know. What do you think?
It's difficult because every team loves a great all-rounder who's who will play in any position when he's asked to play in any position. But that's not always a good thing, because you as an individual know what you want to play, how you want to play, your position. And if you're not getting that, then it's going to be difficult to produce the goods that you might do when you're in your favourite position. It can be, counterproductive for a player if he's in the squad, but he's not in his favoured position. Because, no matter how good you are, it's difficult if you're expected to come in. I mean, I played left back once. I told you this before. The gaffer he played me at left back when Piercy was injured. I said, "Yeah, I played centre half and found that quite comfortable." But left back, I got took to the cleaners by at Southampton by Danny Wallace. He just turned me inside out, and the ignominy of it all was it was a windy night. I went to head the ball, and the ball stopped. It bounced, hit me in the face, and then number 3 came up on the touchline, and I was taken off. And I thought, because I played centre half, this is going to be all right. Believe me, definitely not. So that's how difficult it can be if you're not playing in your favoured position.
Moving on from Dominguez, just on the 3 Brazilians we were supposed to be signing, for people who've been following. Fabrizio Romano said that it was all agreed, and then it seems like Cuiabano, the left back, Brighton have offered him a contract which seems to exceed ours, according to reports. So that one maybe isn't a done deal. Igor Jesus seems like the most done deal, the striker who looks like he's signing. I don't know if you followed it, Gary, or not. I'll tell you about Igor Jesus from everything I've read and spoken to people about him. He's a current Brazil international. Interestingly, he plays as a deeper forward, almost a false 9 who can link the play. He's big, he's strong, but he's slightly different to Chris Wood. So even if you've not seen Igor Jesus play, I'll ask you this question: do you like us signing a player who's like that, more of an all-rounder than Chris, although he maybe not as good a goal scorer? Is it important for us to have something different in that forward line for you?
I think without a doubt. Striking is now, almost redundant. You ask any striker, they're hardly getting a touch in. I think, did Chris have 11 touches in one first half of, and Haaland only had about a dozen touches. That's how difficult in 45 minutes you get a dozen touches. I would have got that in the first 5 minutes of a game when we were playing 12 touches. Because I was always coming towards the ball. I always wanted it. I'd go long. It was just, you wanted to be involved, and it would be so difficult. I find it so difficult now to play football when I'm not getting involved. I'm not, not getting a touch. It must be dreadful for strikers. So if he's got that ability to drop a little bit deeper, get involved, bring other players into the game, then it sounds a very interesting signing without a doubt.
Yeah, we'll keep tabs on that one. We won't really discuss that one today because we've done it a lot, and I don't think there's been any particular developments on that front. Thank you, Peter. Do us a favour, hit like and subscribe if you can. We'll move on and we'll talk a bit more about Palace and Europa League and a few other topics. But just before we do that, a word for Global Telemetrics or a video, and we shall see you in just over 40 seconds.
Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are today in the West Midlands Force area. West Midlands Police have kindly attended and assisted in recovering this Audi RS5 stolen overnight car key burglary early hours. Within 6 hours, Global Telemetrics have been able to locate and recover this vehicle. Again, there's been an intrusion to the victim's home in order to obtain the keys, so no electronic compromise. However, the victim in this case had obviously invested in security and the vehicle was tracked. So again, it pays to invest in security. Another successful recovery at Global Telemetrics.
There you go. Pays to invest in security. So check out the link in the description for Global Telemetrics, and thanks for their support as ever. Let's talk a little bit about the Europa League, Crystal Palace potentially not getting their place and Forest getting it. I thought when I first read this, it probably wasn't going to happen. it would be resolved, that kind of thing. It's dragging on. Certainly, there's some complications around blind trusts and all that kind of stuff. How would you feel as a player? I guess as much as anything, if we got that place, you'd be happy? I assume, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely, it's a step up, isn't it? It's just baffling that Tottenham, despite their dreadful season in the Premier League, are now in the Champions League after winning the trophy. That rankles a great deal with me, but they're the rules. But yeah, it is what it is. We're in Europe anyway. We're in there, and if we get a bonus and lift up one place, then that's can only be good, because I think we deserve it. For the whole season. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And Palace, what a season they've had as well. To be fair, I think it's been the best Premier League season for a long time, because the changing of the guard has happened a little bit. Liverpool have gone back up there, deservedly won the league. City have struggled. Man United, Tottenham down there, but Newcastle have won a trophy. Palace have won the FA Cup. There are teams starting to just edge in and creep in and make a difference. And it's good to see for the Premier League, and hopefully that will continue next season.
Reports say that Forest are pushing to get the place. Evangelos Marinakis saying, if Palace have broken the rules, then we should get the place, basically, is what the reports say. So we'll see how that one develops. It's certainly interesting. And if Palace are kicked out, then Brighton would get into Europe as well. Let's finish. I want to finish. This is slightly more of a wider Premier League question, but it does impact Forest because there's lots of stuff going on at other clubs, most notably Tottenham, and it impacts Brentford. And I mentioned about João Pedro potentially going to Newcastle and knocking Brighton. What did you think, first of all, about Postecoglou getting the sack? And then we'll talk about how it impacts Forest. But what did you think about Ange getting the bullet?
I don't think it surprised a great deal of people. There was talk about it. You feel a little bit for him, because the early part of he lost all his back four, more or less, didn't he? All his centre halves, through injury. And if you're going to lose key players, and it's more than your two centre halves and the backups, then you're going to struggle a little bit, and that's what's happened. I can never understand why Brennan didn't start all the time. That surprised me. And the guy, what's his name, who came from Bournemouth, a striker, Solanke, he was brilliant for Bournemouth, but he's not quite worked for him so far at Tottenham. There's going to have to be a big upheaval now. The talk of Thomas Frank going there, which would be, I think, a perfect fit. It'd be sad for Brentford, because what he's done for them has been tremendous. They're one of the teams that have been pushing and progressing, and they looks like they're going to lose key players as well, so that could affect them massively. But yeah, I don't think it's a surprise. A lot of people said, I think people were talking about Nuno maybe being in trouble, but I'm just glad. I hope that was rubbish, because you've got to put it in perspective again. We've got to say this. I mean, the season we've had this season just passed, nobody would have predicted that at all before a ball was kicked. If you'd have said, I keep saying this, I've done quite a few interviews just lately, and if you'd have said at the start of the season, before a ball was kicked, if you'd have stood there and said to somebody, Forest are going to be in Europe, they'd have laughed their heads off and say, what are you talking about? After last season. So that's monumental. It's just so disappointing. That's the big thing about, if we'd have won one of our last 4 home games, we would have been in the Champions League. Because everything went for us on the last day of the season. Newcastle and Villa. It was the Leicester game, wasn't it, that probably cost us the Champions League. But to get into Europe again, I know how important and what a great feeling it is, to be part of a team that is in Europe, and it's a great feeling to have as a player. And you've just got to go and embrace it. Look, Chelsea won the title. One of the European competitions. Tottenham did. So it's a you can do it. It's there for everybody, and let's just hope that we get that lift up to the next position and play in the not the what do they call it? We're in the conference, and but whatever happens, we're in Europe. We're playing there. We're playing half decent teams, and you can learn from that. You can get better. You can improve as a player, as a team. So let's just wait and see, and just hope we can, get that place.
Yeah, I wanted to just touching on next season and mentioning Brentford. Pat references Bournemouth here. So with Brentford, first of all, Thomas Frank looks like he's probably going to be the next Spurs manager. Brian Mbeumo seems desperate to sign for Man United for whatever reason, money, I guess, and prestige certainly. And then Vissa might go. It always feels to me like Brentford are going to have a horrible season and eventually go, but they keep defying the odds. Are they just a team that's probably going to finish mid-table again and evolve into a different version of themselves, do you think, or could they struggle next season?
Well, they could struggle if they lose key players. Any team that loses key players, and they don't replace them with the like, are going to struggle. But you look at you've mentioned Bournemouth, Brentford, Forest, Fulham, Brighton. They've all come up and stayed there. Last couple of seasons, the 3 teams that have come up have gone back down again. And who's to say that won't happen again next season? Because the Premier League is getting more difficult without a doubt. Because more teams are getting involved. Your Villas, your Newcastles. But look at West Ham's decline. They were up there. They won a European competition. Is it 4th from bottom they finished last season? So things can go a little bit wrong if you don't get it right and you don't get that continuity going. Season after season. But obviously, the clubs with less money are going to struggle a little bit more. That's why Chelsea are up there all the time. Liverpool, Man City, Man United have been up there. It's the teams that at the top have got more money. They should compete on a regular basis. Arsenal as well. If Arsenal don't sign a striker this season, well, it's going to be incredible because Arteta's under pressure. Last 3 seasons, that people have said if Arsenal have had a striker, they could have won the Premier League, and still there's no sign of a striker coming in with them. So that's going to be an interesting one for me again with Arsenal.
Just finishing up with Bournemouth, Huijsen's gone to Real Madrid. Kirkes looks like he's going to Liverpool, and Zabani looks like PSG want to sign him. So those teams are kind of getting raided. And then we mentioned Man United. Spurs are going to be able to strengthen. West Ham are going to be able to strengthen. So how are you seeing us next season in terms of where you would like us to be aiming for in terms of league position when you balance that out with the demands of European competition and trying to win a domestic cup? What right now with this squad, what do you think is a realistic aim?
Well, you have to progress, and the team will believe that's possible. You've got to put the back end of the season, out of the equation a little bit. Pressure brings its own problems, and that was pressure because the football club were desperate to get back into the Champions League. The talk of all all those years ago and everything, and it didn't happen. And people say, well, it should have done. Like I said, one win in the last 4 at home. Brentford, Everton, Leicester, Chelsea. We'd have been there, but we're not. But it was, in terms of successful season, I think it was a very successful season. And anybody who said it wasn't, I disagree with, because of where we finished last season, the struggles we've had the previous season. It was fantastic for everybody, and the fans played a massive part. And we've got a fabulous owner. Let's not forget what this chap has done for the football club. The investment he's put in there has been massive. I'm talking about it through COVID. He's been incredible. He's put his money where his mouth is. And I think he'll continue to do that. I think he'll see that the progress is possible. And, we can get players in who will make a difference. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next season, because last season was just incredible. It was great to see us back in Europe, and big smile on the face of Nottingham. It really was.
Gary's doing a very good job today of linking into the next topic. I was just going to say on Evangelos Marinakis, the whole blind trust thing has been dissolved. He's back in charge, and I'm sure he was really all along. These UEFA rules are an absolute shambles, but he's back, and the 3 directors that were appointed have now been unappointed, although not replaced. So I'm sure we'll see probably the same 3 directors who left return to the board, because, like I say, these UEFA rules are ridiculous, but that's how it all is. Right. I think that covers everything I wanted to cover today. Any final thoughts? Anything you wanted to add, Gary, before we go?
Not really. I've said, about last season that you can say no more about, the success of it. You just want it to progress. I don't know. The tennis yesterday was the only thing you could say incredible. You know, they're saying the longest match in history, 5 hours, 29 minutes at the French Open. You know, two of the great players are going to be there for years. And yeah, it's you know, you watch other sports when football's finished, and it's great that you've got that opportunity to do that. And but yeah, we're watching the newspapers every day with bated breath to see who's coming, who's going, and you know, the rumours that are, you know, constantly happening. And yeah, pre-season's always good for that. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get the right players in. Just hope Taiwo gets, you know, fit well and, you know, soon, and he's back there, you know, pre-season, putting himself about again, because you know, he's still an important player in the squad. But you know, I think everybody said we have to sign another striker. I think it's paramount that we do that. And yeah, we'll hopefully see that happen. And I'm very optimistic for what's going to happen for next season, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think Igor Jesus should be one, and we'll see what else happens. But there'll be lots to discuss, certainly. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour: hit like, hit subscribe, consider membership or Patreon. If you're a member, you'll get access to pre-recorded interviews, and we've got a few good ones coming up this week. So do check that out.
Oh, I've got to just say one thing here, Matt. You know, we're talking about different managers. We're talking about Tuchel, who's I think under pressure a little bit. But you're talking about Amorim at Manchester United. You know, the way he's going about things, the way he's doing things, it just baffles me a little bit, because every player has got a different metabolism. You know, nobody's got the same metabolism. Not every player can do what the other one can. Some people run faster than others. Some people have got more stamina than others. You know, I played, you know, with the guys, you know, in my era. John Robertson, genius, worst trainer you've ever seen. You know, he would not have played football today in the, you know, the mentality of what, you know, maybe Amorim's saying and doing at Manchester United. You know, Kenny Burns and Larry Lloyd. You never want to play against those two. For goodness sake, they're two great centre halves. Terrible trainers. Viv Anderson, you know, fantastic. You know, he loved sprinting, but you ask him to do long distance, he was moaning and groaning. He hated it. You know, everybody's different. And it really annoys me that, you know, managers and coaches pigeonhole everybody and say, you know, you've got to do the same thing. Everybody tries to be the best they can. And if you can see somebody who's not doing that deliberately, then fine. But not everybody can do what everybody else can do. You know, Brian Robson I played with at Manchester United. You know, he's one of the best trainers ever. You like to drink. But my word, you know, what a trainer he was. What an honest pro he was. You know, you can't pigeonhole everybody. And that is disappointing, because you know, you'd never. I would never have played with John Robertson then, and you know, it doesn't make any sense to do that. He's just saying it's my way or the highway. Well, if that's the case, then well, let's see how it goes. But you know, you've got to take every player individually. You can't expect them all to do the same thing.
Would you have a look at Garnacho? If, say, Elanga goes, this is all pie in the sky and just end of podcast chat. If Elanga goes, Garnacho can go. He seems to have an attitude, whether it's an attitude problem or not, or maybe he's just a young, immature man. Would you look at him or not?
Well, you know, they said that about Elanga. You know, the other talks about him and Hudson-Odoi, you know, people like that. But they've come to Forest under Nuno, who's put faith in them. And that's what it's all about. You know, having somebody who's got faith in you as a player. You know, that's what Clough used to do. He used to send you out, and you knew 100% that he believed in you. And there was nothing in your mind. Your mind was clear when you went out. You know, he didn't, you know, say anything before the game. He knew what you could do, and he just asked you to go and do that. Simplicity is king. You know, I think football is so overcomplicated now by some, you know, managers, and it doesn't need to be. You know, you look at Crystal Palace, what they do. You look at Newcastle and Villa. You know, you're happy to see that. You know, it's not rocket science. Don't overthink it. It's a great game, but it can get a bit tedious. You know, with the strikers not having touches, and you know, the goalkeeper having more touches than, you know, the striker, and that's the nature of the game at the moment. But teams last season changed that a little bit. You know, they went long, they turned defenders. Palace, you know, it was great to watch them. It was great to watch Newcastle and Villa, because they booked the trend. And, you know, Manchester City, you know, dropped a little bit off the pace. You know, ask any defender, they hate getting turned. When they're facing their own goal, They hate that. And, you know, the teams who were successful last season and winning things did that. You know, Liverpool, they went direct. They go direct at times. They don't, you know, overly pass it all the time. You know, they've got the ability to do both. And, you know, I think that's a great season for people to think about, you know, what's going to happen next season regarding the Premier League. You know, Liverpool are the team to beat, and everybody's got to catch up with that. And I'm really looking forward to next season, because I'm hoping that that's going to happen again, that, you know, there are going to be several teams in and around there, you know, that weren't expected to be there. You know, it gets boring when it's the same old. And last year, like I say, bucked the trend, and it was great to see.
A little bit of Garnacho feedback before we go. Derek, yes, if the price is right. Pat says the same. Another Andrea, yes, and then another yes from Paul. Or Jack says, I'd rather lick piss off a nettle. I think that's about Elanga than Garnacho than anything else. But yeah,
I mean, you look at Manchester United getting rid of McTominay, and look what he's done in Italy. He's just,
he won the MVP or whatever it's called. Yeah.
You know, it's not. I bet he's being treated totally different to the way he was treated when he was playing in the Premier League.
Yeah. I mean, I hate watching Garnacho because he's one of those players that you probably love him if he's in your team and hate him otherwise. So I see something there. But yeah, off on a tangent, and we'll do more stuff like that through the summer. But we will be back tomorrow. Here's a TV recommendation. Rolling back the years, haven't done these for years. Department Q on Netflix. We'll blitz that over the last couple of days with my wife, and that's really good if you're looking for something to watch. So there you go. Right, we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for your company, everyone. Do hit like before you go, or subscribe. That'd be great. Gary, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
It was. And thanks to Temps for the first half of the show as well. Like I say, we'll be back tomorrow. So have a good day, everyone. If we don't see you then, we shall see you soon.